Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Full Quota podcast. We're just doing podcasts thick and fast, but that's because of the nature of what's been happening with South African cricket. We're trying to get all these fixtures in, and now we've got another series we're going to be talking about. So we've got more podcasts, and yeah, we're doing it. But South Africa is obviously coming out of the West Indies series. We're recording during that time with the final T20. So, yeah, I just saw short boundaries of the Wanderers and I was like, ooh, high scoring game. But anyway, I don't come alone. I've got Tim here. Tim, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'll admit, I've got one eye on the West Indian game at the moment, but all good, dude, all good. Looking forward to this chat. Looking forward to the chat.
Yeah, so this is your cricketing podcast, African cricketing podcast, as you always know. So you can find us on Spotify, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, also on YouTube. Please do like and subscribe. And if you'd like to advertise any advertising options, please to find out what our advertising options are, please do email me at mpho@1wsr.com. So now, whenever there's a new series, we like to get a guest on, an expert to talk about the country we're going to be playing. And as you know, South Africa are going to be playing in the qualifier. Well, not the qualifier. Well, it effectively is. It's an effective qualifier. But anyway, they're playing in a series against the Netherlands. And South Africa need to win both games in order for them to qualify for the World Cup automatically. If they do not win both games and results don't go their way elsewhere, they could find themselves in a World Cup qualifier in Zim. And if that ever happens, we're going to probably bring this person back up as well to give us a lay of the land of the other teams below there. But outside of that, we've got the Netherlands series, and we're going to do a preview of that series with our Netherlands correspondent and resident expert, Bertus Jong. So we're going to bring him on, and we're going to ask him a lot of questions. So the first question is, hi, Bertus, how are you doing? This is the second part of the first part that we did that got stopped by Omicron. So I think you and Tim did that interview because I was having trouble in Zimbabwe with Wi-Fi, but you're in an interesting part of the world, but we've got you back on now.
Evening, gents. Yeah, great to be back on the pod. It's a bit odd because, we did a pre-series pod for this a couple of years ago now. So I guess this is a mid-series pod now, or 1/3 of the way through. But yeah, it's great to be back on. Joining you from a bit closer this time. Yeah, I'm just down in Namibia. I guess up in Namibia for you guys.
Yeah, so
awesome.
I would call it a mid-cap because it's a mid-series, not a pre-cap or a recap, but it's a mid-series recap. The one thing I want to ask you is obviously so much has changed. And the first question for me is, what has changed in terms of the squad that was there in 21? Yeah, it was 2021. And now that's coming back to 2023.
Oh, gosh. All right, yeah. I mean, I have to try and remember what the squad was like back in 2021 now. Because, let's see, Peter Saylor's retired as captain. His back has finally got better of him. Then who else? I think Clayton Floyd was on that tour. He's not going to be with the Dutch this time. Neither are Shane Snater. And then we have a whole bunch of unavailabilities and or injuries. So Colin Ackerman is missing owing to county preseason commitments. Buster Lader would have been missing anyway had he not been injured, which he now is. Tim van Niekerk's not there. I think my understanding is that Roelof van der Merwe has also flown back to England. I don't think that was an injury, but I'm not entirely clear on what the reasons for that was. But he was supposed to be playing the Zimbabwe series and missed that one. So I understand that's personal reasons of some sort. Who else was there? Brandon Glover, I think, also was on.
That was like his debut.
Yeah. Well, in ODIs, perhaps he played a fair bit for the Dutch before that. But,
yeah.
Oh, and who else is missing?
There was also what's his name? The South African-born guy, Myburg, but I think he's retired as well.
Yeah,
Myburg.
Steph Steph retired from ODIs after the New Zealand series last year, so he's missing as well. Tom Cooper is back for the Dutch. He's come back into the Dutch side since that series after a protracted hiatus. Although again, is something of an injury concern because my understanding is that he picked up a delayed concussion in the Zimbabwe series. I noticed he didn't play today in the warm-ups, so I was sort of expecting him to be lining up against South Africa, but that is now also a doubt.
Okay.
So many changes, but those are not the only changes. Obviously, that's in terms of the personnel, but you've also had coaching changes within that time. Just give us a flavour of who's here now for this. You don't need to go back into who was there in 2021. Just focus on who was there for the series.
Yeah, I mean, coaching changes. Well, Ryan left, and then Ryan came in, and now we have Ryan. So that's on to our third Ryan here. Ryan Campbell's moved to Durham. Ryan Cook is the new head coach, I think permanent head coach now, but is missing this series for IPL commitments. So it's Tyson van Niekerk who's taken charge for this tour, another acolyte of Gary Kirstens, who of course has a long-standing Dutch connection. And there's a couple of others, like Heino Kuhn and Russell Domingo are also on the coaching staff. And then the side that the Netherlands have is, especially now, I think it was looking quite thin on paper, and now that there's been a couple of injuries and further unexpected unavailabilities, it is there's a lot of youngsters in there. Shariz and Musa Ahmed, who have played a fair bit. I think Musa was actually on the tour as well a couple of years back, but they've been stepping in an awful lot while the Dutch have their traditional availability issues. Shariz, especially young wrist spinner and lower order bat, has been looking very good on this tour. He's still just 19 years old. Tasia Nidamanuru, who's Indian-born, Auckland-raised, I believe, has been in the Netherlands for several years now. He comes into the side and has been doing good work for us as a lower order backstop / finisher. And then Wesley Baresi, of course, who's a name that will be familiar for very long term.
Yes.
Watchers of Dutch cricket, is also working on a comeback. So it's very different side, very young, very sort of developmental, that we've rolled out here.
Yeah.
Okay. That's actually quite interesting. So if it is a developmental side, what is the Netherlands hoping to achieve in these next two games? Obviously, World Cup qualification is a different conversation now than it was in 2021 to try to see if you can't get any points anywhere else. But now, obviously, you're on the back end of the Super League. What are they looking to gain and to get out of this series?
Well, I think even in 2021, while it wasn't arithmetically impossible, direct qualification was not really something that the Dutch were thinking about. And I think when we last spoke, the news had just broken that the Super League had been scrapped. So even avoiding relegation isn't something that the Dutch can hope for. If you actually look at World Cup qualification, the Dutch are in a bit of an interesting position here, because if they do pick up a win or even two, in fact, it doesn't matter if it's one or two. If they pick up a win in this series, then South Africa are joining them in the qualifier, which arguably means if they win either of these games, they're probably not helping their chances of qualifying for the World Cup at all. So perhaps the injuries and availability is something of a blessing in disguise, because they're not the sort of team that are going to throw games, but they are turning up with rather fewer match winners, and it might have been a worry otherwise, because as we know from the World Cup, the Dutch beating South Africa is perhaps not as far-fetched as we might have thought before.
Yes, it is.
It did. I think even as soon as a couple of weeks ago, me and Mpho were discussing it, and I was saying, yeah, we're favourites, but I genuinely thought you guys had a chance. But with those changes that you talked about and those late withdrawals, it does make things
And the changes
very,
to the
very
South African
tough.
side, I think quite a few people didn't expect them to roll out a full-strength team, and from what I've seen of the squad list, which I only just saw this morning, looks pretty full-strength to me.
Welcome
It
to the
is.
World Cup. That's the
It
World
is.
Cup 15.
It is essentially the World Cup squad. That is what it is. So we are at full strength and you are not, which is for the neutral is a real shame. I did see that
I think
one of the names
for the
that you
West Indies,
mentioned.
it's a real shame.
Yes.
I did see one of the names you mentioned. Tasia made 100 against Zimbabwe. Could you give us a bit more about him? Because I saw a little bit of it, but I didn't see an awful lot of it to really make a conscious viewpoint on the way he played.
Yeah, so Tasia's an interesting one. He's been living in the Netherlands for a number of years now, I think 4 or 5 years. Came over for work, in fact. Is still has a day job, in fact, or at least did the last time I spoke to him. And is one of these players that may not have had a look in were it not for the fact that the Dutch sort of have these perennial availability problems. But he impressed during the home summer that the Dutch had, their ODI league fixtures there. It's not 100% clear quite where he fits in the side or where he will going forward, but at the moment he's playing this role in the lower order where he sort of functions by turns as a sort of backstop for when you have unfortunately all too frequent collapses or as a sort of finisher, which is more of the role that he plays in club cricket in the Netherlands, where he comes in and looks to clear the ropes. So he's certainly an extremely versatile player from what I've seen of him in club cricket and bowls as well. Probably not likely to be bowling for the Netherlands unless the situation is particularly dire. But he's a newcomer to the team. He only qualified on residency, I think at the beginning of the summer. So what his role would be in a full-strength team, and if he keeps scoring runs, of course, it would be difficult to exclude him. That's not really clear yet. And I think the squad that the Netherlands have out in Southern Africa, as you saw against Zimbabwe, is basically whoever they can get. So putting your best team together, putting your best batting order together, putting your best attack together, I don't think that even now it's settled. They've had those a few warm-up games in the series against Zimbabwe, and you see they're still chopping and changing. It's a bit of a scratch squad, and yeah, a bit of an unusual one in that respect.
Yeah, that is quite unfortunate, obviously, but there are cricket games that need to be played, and there is a possibility that the Netherlands could win. My question to you would obviously then be, what if the Netherlands win? Who would it be out of the guys who are obviously available that will be the one that the team would be looking to play a match-winning performance?
Well, I think the first name you'd go for is probably Tom Cooper, which is why I think this concussion worry is even more of a concern for the Dutch. Now, on this tour, and I spoke about Shariz Ahmed, he's only 19, and again, one of the players probably was obviously going to play for the Netherlands eventually, but almost certainly wouldn't have been playing for them yet, were it not for the situation. He's really stepped up. Then you have, bit left field because he's actually struggled a bit since he's come back, but I feel like Wesley Baresi really has a point to make, and he's got a lot of experience in South Africa, and the conditions probably suit him. I think if you were looking at and then in form, it's hard to say. Scotty Edwards has been doing good work, but I don't know how well he'll go against out-and-out pace on quicker tracks. It's, again, less his game, but he's been doing great work. It's hard to see. Again, the Max O'Dowd has been making runs, But it's a very different proposition, I think, making runs against the bowling attack that he's likely to face. So yeah, you can look to say the guys that have done well over the course of the season, but again in different conditions against different opposition. You can look at the guys that were making and Tom, of course, was along with Colin Ackerman, who's now absent, the guy that was making the impact runs against South Africa in the T20. But I think those are you're looking to your senior bats, I guess, especially the guys who have had more experience in these conditions and against this quality. And I think Bertus is probably the boldest pick in that respect, because he's someone who has that experience and has done it in the past, even if he's not exactly informed at the moment. But I think those are the guys with the bat that the Dutch will be looking to, the guys that will have seen this sort of thing before. But notably, in fact, in the warm-up game, I don't know if you've seen it. I've only seen the scorecard. I haven't had a chance to watch it back yet. But again, it was the two teenagers down in the order, Cherise and Aryan Dutt, that actually made useful runs down the order, even though, of course, they did end up losing that by 3 wickets. So yeah, it's a great chance for the youngsters to really step up to a level that maybe they won't have been used to before. But certainly for in terms of runs, you got to be looking at those senior guys with a bit of experience, especially experience in South African conditions and against the sort of bowling that South Africa are bringing to the table.
Yeah, that's actually quite interesting, because looking at that scorecard, obviously got contributions from Beresi, 31, Scott Edwards with the 38, as you said, Cherise Butt with 33, and Aryan Dutt with 29. Max O'Dowd at the top, getting 29 runs. I would say it would be a disappointing effort for the Dutch, but as you have rightly mentioned, with all the injuries and unavailabilities, it makes it quite hard for them to.
From a South African point of view, Mpho, it was effectively South Africa A. If you look at the names that were there, you might have called it invitational 11, but it really was, in terms of personnel, a pretty strong South African setup side that you played there. The other thing, you talked earlier just there about the leggy. I was very impressed with him today in the warm-up game. You know, I would have liked Netherlands to have scored a few more runs, but I saw something there about with Shariz Ahmed. I think he may well cause the top level the Proteas trouble on Friday if he plays. I think I know you guys are a little bit light in terms of the bowling department, but I think he offers you something different. So if I was the Dutch, I would definitely be putting him in straight away, because he's showing he can bat as well.
I don't think there's any question he'll play. Yeah, I think you're right, and it's remarkable because, as I say, he is very young. He is, as is Aryan, but Aryan Dutt came in the summer and he took wickets against top teams, and Cherise has done the same on this tour, and it's remarkable just the sort of maturity and confidence that he seems to bring to the field, in spite of the fact that what you essentially have is your two frontline spinners are both teenagers, with because Roelof is missing and Peter Selaar is retired, and those are the guys that were, I think, in the first game, not taking wickets, but were keeping South Africa boxed up. They were the guys that were going for under 4.5 and over.
Yes.
And the seamers were maybe taking wickets, but again, that's where South Africa were finding their runs. So there's a lot, actually. Yeah, if you're looking at the Netherlands' chances of bagging a win here, you'd say the Dutch seam section is maybe not quite of the quality that is likely to that you'd expect to trouble top South African bats in South Africa, but is solid and experienced. The spin section is where you actually look at it. You go, well, this could either go badly wrong, but it could go right. And if it does, then I think that's really I think where the Netherlands' chances hinge on, which is, I mean, quite quite extraordinary if you think about it, that the Dutch are basically counting on two 19-year-olds to go well against South Africa in South Africa. I mean, it's again, if these were pressure games for the Dutch, if these were games to stay up in the ODI league, it would be enormous pressure to put on what are still basically their kids. But as it stands, it's actually just a great opportunity for them to perform, and it'd be great if one or other took them. Though, of course, not great for South Africa or, in fact, the Dutch, but great for the Windies.
Yeah. The other, so obviously with all these unavailabilities and looking obviously forward towards the World Cup qualifiers that will be in Zim, will the guys who aren't available now be available then? And is there then a case that this 11 or the squad of 13 needs to try and get as many games against good opposition by the time they get to Zimbabwe?
Yeah, that was basically been the big question in Dutch cricket since it was announced that the qualifier would be slap bang in the middle of county season, and it's essentially an open question. Now the fact that the honest answer is I don't know, and I'm not sure that even the KNCB knows at this point. It depends, I imagine, on where the counties are at that point, on who gets picked up for what teams, and essentially what the arrangements were when they're signing, because you now have Brandon and Bas have both gone to Durham under, ironically enough, Ryan Campbell and Jimmy Hilditch, who are running the show there now. Now you'd think that Ryan and Jimmy would be sympathetic when the Dutch come calling, but on the other hand, they have a job to do there as well. So the honest answer, I'm sorry to say, is I have absolutely no idea what sort of team the Netherlands will be sending to Zimbabwe.
Okay.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. But
yes,
not just on the Netherlands, because
I mean, it is
you would hope,
because if I did know, it'd be a great scoop.
Yeah. Look, my thinking is, I thought so. What was the thinking and what was the feeling in the Netherlands after the shock defeat by South Africa, but incredible win in that T20 World Cup? Was it one of those, we've done this before against a big nation, it happens once in a while, or did it? Because I thought it might have gained a little bit more momentum to try and necessarily get this side ready for the World Cup qualifiers to take a shot.
Well, I think certainly the Dutch. I mean, the Dutch have beaten full members, mostly England, at World Cups before. So it wasn't. I don't think anybody in the Netherlands, especially seeing how the Dutch had played through that tournament, necessarily thought that it was beyond the realm of possibility. And of course, just directly qualifying for the next World T20 is huge for the Dutch, and of course helps the Scots and the Irish as well now, because going to regional qualification, it means that they've got two spots to share rather than having to split two of them with the Netherlands as well. But yeah, the reaction in the Netherlands, well, they got a bit of back page coverage, but as usual, it's still a minor sport in the Netherlands, and
and it was in between
a couple of inches, and if you're lucky, a photo is all you're going to get from the national press here. I mean, you probably have to win the World Cup to get anything more than that. But yeah, the reaction basically is twofold. First is, it's a great performance from the Dutch, who've been up and down in that World Cup, and of course, a massive sort of relief after the horror show of the previous World Cup only 8 months earlier, which had been something of a humiliation. So yeah, it's obviously a great positive though, and it gives the Dutch that breathing room and also the ability to play some games with less pressure, with this an extensive 18 program scheduled for the coming summer. Of course, now that we don't have any Super League games, there's only 18 games being scheduled for the summer, and the KNCB have said, and deliberately said, look, this is a chance for us to play some young players, but it's also a chance for us to give something back to European cricket to smaller associates. So they've got a substantial 18 program lined up now against the likes of Jersey in Austria, Germany, and the likes are playing a substantial number of games here. And I think it's a great move from the KCB to sort of model by example what you'd hope that full members would also do for associates in their region, which the ECB conspicuously does not do.
Yeah, it's a really big indictment on the ECB there, but anyway.
No, but it's right. I suppose my last question would be, and slightly unfair, because they've literally just sort of arrived there in terms of Heino Kun. But has there been any sort of feedback from the players around having him around, having that South African local knowledge about our players as well as our conditions? Has there been any sort of feedback in terms of that?
I should point out that Heino is, you said just arrived, but he's well known in Dutch cricket. He played here at Amsterdam Cricket Club for a number of years. So he's well known around. And again, the Gary Kirsten connection, the Dutch are rarely, intelligence on South African conditions and South African players is rarely in short supply in the Dutch camp, because the amount of South Africans that come and play here, there's always someone around that's played with every player in South Africa. So the Dutch will know who they're dealing with. But yeah, I think having Heino on board, and I think he's back. I think I can officially confirm back playing for ACC this coming season in the Netherlands. So I think he's likely to be involved on a long-term basis. So I mean that's great news for the Netherlands. And I mean it's always great, and I think to have these tours. There's been a long-standing cricket connection between South Africa and the Netherlands, as we went into in some depth last time. But yeah, it can only help having those guys involved.
Yeah. I just looked it up briefly. This is the 5th ODI since 1996, which is really, really bad. We played a lot in terms of other formats, I suppose. Am I right? Would that be right? 5 ODIs?
No, between South Africa and the Netherlands.
This will be the 6th.
It should be said that the Dutch don't always have ODI status throughout that time.
Yes.
But also one or two ODIs every 3 or 4 years is actually remarkably good. The only full members that play with any regularity are, well, Ireland, of course, because they're nearby and used to be an associate, and Zimbabwe, who turn up quite regularly. And these days, and that hopefully will change. New Zealand have been back on their own accord, so they came over and played some T20s which weren't mandated. So and then Pakistan have said they'll be back as well. But yeah, so it's not a huge amount of ODIs in a substantial number of time. But don't be too down on yourselves, because but certainly not the worst.
Yeah, look, it's we're going to be playing our 6th ODI, but obviously the previous one was rained out, which gave both teams 5 points and started the spiral in South African cricket around, are we going to make it or not? But it's really good to have to close the chapter with the Netherlands, because I think even after the World Cup, it's really nice. And I do think that we do need to figure out a way to play more games, even if it is, instead of going through Ireland to play the England, we can go through mainland Europe and play the Netherlands before we go to England. But there's so many political machinations that happen in world cricket that I don't think the three of us can solve on this podcast right now. There are 2 games left in the Super League qualification for both teams. One's going to be on Friday at Willamore Park in Benoni, which I think the Dutch will love to play in. It's a beautiful stadium in the east of Gauteng. It's not the Bull Ring, but it's something. And then the Dutch play in their first ever pink ODI. Bertus, how many players excited playing in a pink ODI?
Sorry, you just
You went out there, Paul. Sorry, you went.
I I just wanted to ask if the players were excited to play in a pink ODI. It'll be their first ever pink ODI.
I don't know. I mean, you have to track one of them down to ask them. It's not something I've spoken to them about, being as I am trapped here at the qualified playoff in Namibia. But doubtless, I think it'll be a great spectacle, won't it?
Yeah, it will be. We just look. I think we're looking for something more competitive. Well, look, we obviously want South Africa to win, but we also want the Netherlands to showcase their best and to showcase that they do deserve to be playing against full member nations, even though, as you've mentioned, over the years they've either lost their status or their ODI status or not. And I honestly don't think that I think the ICC should just give out ODI status because. It's an easy way to get the non-full member nations playing cricket. Bertus, I just want to say thank you very much for joining us. All the best to the Netherlands as they try and create a bit of drama in the Super League. That's all I'm going to say. Create a bit of drama and help the West Indies if you could. It's either having the West Indies or having us in Zimbabwe. You just need to take your pick.
It's up to the Dutch to decide.
Yes, but thank you very much.
Just before I go, I would actually also like to plug the tournament that I'm at right now. So if your listeners are looking for some ODI cricket with countries they may not have seen before to watch, the broadcast quality isn't great, but on ICC TV you can also check out some of the lower tier, some of the second tier associate members who didn't make the Super League. But they're playing to try and get to where South Africa are trying to avoid. They're looking for a spot in that qualifier tournament, and we're looking at it's looking like it's going to be a great tournament here in Windhoek as well.
What countries are playing in Windhoek?
So that's Namibia, the hosts. They just missed out after Nepal had an extraordinary run in World Cricket League 2 to go directly to the qualifier. So Namibia are the hosts. They're struggling with some injury issues at the moment. So they're actually, otherwise they'd be favourites as it is. They might be in a spot of bother. They just lost to the United States, who are the second seed in this tournament and looking very good. They've got Ali Khan back and he's bowling absolute gas. Then you've got the UAE, who are trying to escape from a sort of nightmare run of form, but did bounce back against the fourth seeds. That's Papua New Guinea, who finished bottom of League 2, and then you've got Canada, who are up looking for revenge against the United States, who sent them down to the Challenge Leagues at this tournament in 2019, and up with them just made their ODI debut yesterday is Jersey. It's not a I imagine a cricketing country that many of your listeners will have heard of.
All I know is that it's a tax haven in South
Africa. So I'm told, and a lovely and beautiful tax haven it is too. If you ever get the chance to visit, watch some cricket at Farmers Field, it's a great place. So yeah, if you're at a loose end, obviously you wouldn't recommend. I'm not advocating anyone skip South Africa, Netherlands for it. But if you're at a loose end, an awful lot of cricket in your neighbour to the north going on as well.
That's awesome. Thank you. Yeah,
awesome.
You can catch those games on the ICC.tv. You can actually download the app. It's really user friendly, and yeah, get to know the cricket from the rest of the world and players from the rest of the world. And the other thing is, obviously, with Major League Cricket happening, you can watch the USA and actually see some of the guys who'll be playing in that T20 tournament that's supposed to take over the world. We need a European.
Yeah, if they get the USA
T20
board to approve
franchise.
it, which currently they're not, because they're throwing one of their typical strops. But that's I think that's a matter for a completely different podcast.
It is.
It is. But outside of that, all I'm saying is my point was Europe needs a T20 franchise type of league that's not in England, that brings the best in the world to make it Europe.
That is also another matter for an entirely different podcast.
Okay,
There's
look,
a
you're
few
giving us
stories
ideas.
there. I could definitely talk to you guys for a good while about the troubles and tribulations of the Euro Slam. But
Maybe we'll have an associate podcast later on, maybe down the road.
Yes.
Okay. Well, wonderful to chat again, guys.
Yes, thank you very much,
Yeah.
man.
Cheers, Bertus.
Cool.
Thanks, mate.
Tim? here's the Netherlands preview from Bertus himself. It's not a strong enough. It's not a strong team. It's not a strong team. It's not their best, but they're gonna come here and they're gonna give 110%. Yes, they did lose by 3 wickets to the to the SA Invitational, which by no means should make any SA fans think that it's a walk in the park. And from a South African perspective, obviously it is a strong 11. They are playing. There is the threat of rain, Tim, that could kind of derail South Africa's chance to qualify. But if they win one game and if the second game gets abandoned due to rain, they still make it in, largely because, they'll still make it in only if New Zealand beats Sri Lanka. But even if Sri Lanka does beat New Zealand, I don't think Sri Lanka gets to 93 points. They get to 92. So it's largely safe. Just win one game, then win the next one, and win the World Cup.
It's basically that. Yes, you're not gonna get Ireland beating Bangladesh 3 zip. It's technically possible. It's technically possible. That is technically possible, but I just think that's not going to quite happen. What is interesting of that, though, the most interesting point for me, I know we're going off a little tangent, just a little bit, but for me, that series is played in England, not in Ireland. So there's more chance of that being played than if it was in Ireland. There's slightly less rain in England, so there is that. There is that.
Cool. Okay, let's close it out. Thank you very much, Tim. Everybody enjoy the ODI series, and good luck to both teams. And hopefully South Africa make it through, and all the best to the Netherlands as well as they try to stop that from happening. Outside of that, goodbye, good night, and lesale kakahiso.